Stay positive. Enjoy the journey.
Fight Ready's Kevin Natividad looking to emerge from the Quicksand, that's his nickname, and get his first win since July of 2020 when he took on Fight Ready striking coach Kyle Estrada. And if for Kevin Natividad, he really does have a great opportunity against the former Ultimate Fighter winner, Ricky Turcios, season 29's own, had that win over Brady. Hiestand, who's also on this card, so it's got to be a little bit awkward. The Spider-Man meme, hey, like, look at that. We split decision win for Ricky Turcios. And if you do look at this fight overall, a bit of a clash of styles. I mean, for Natividad, in the two fights in the UFC, he's been finished in both, and he took on a varied level of competition. I mean, you're taking on a guy like Miles Johns on short notice. You're taking on a guy like Della. It's going to be a tough time out there, but he did get finished in both of those fights, and he really has struggled against the counter left hook in a lot of his matchups. And it's a tale of the test of time, if you will, because if you look at it, even his first loss back in 2017 against a fighter who was 36 years old and 3-2, he gets finished in just seconds.
You don't love that.
By a counter left hook running in, going for an exchange.
Let's start with Natividad. We talk about some fighters now, okay, they only lose in one way. They only struggle with one type of fighter. Montel Jackson was a guy who I brought this up about last week. How, hey, Montel Jackson in the UFC up until this point has only struggled with pressure wrestlers who are really, really good with their pressure wrestling. So that's why I thought he was going to be able to win his fight, because that wasn't the matchup that he was facing. For Natividad, he has struggled with some of those rangier strikers, which is what Turcios can bring to the table. But Turcios is interesting because I feel like I get excited about him in his UFC debut because I don't watch The Ultimate Fighter. It's not something I really care about, nor have I cared about in a long time. But since we were trying to get more into it, I found myself just kind of attaching myself to Ricky Turcios and being interested in his story. He seemed to say all the right things. He had that exciting fighting style. And really, at the end of the day, that's all I care about. Be exciting in the cage. I'm going to like watching you fight. Turcios did check all of those boxes, but for every guy who is that exciting, there's always a give and a take to it. I had told you there was a comp that I wanted to bring up about him. You said Tony Ferguson. I think for Turcios, the best version, like the Hall of Fame version, yes, it could be a Tony Ferguson, this great offensive fighter who, yes, has some trouble with his defense, his striking, and with his wrestling. I think that's fair to say with Turcios as well. But Turcios, I think, is going to have a career like Alex Caceres a bit. I could see him just having a good career. Winning some fights, losing some fights, being a borderline ranked fighter sometimes, losing some fights that you think he's going to win, and winning some fights that you think he's going to lose. And I know that's a weird comp to bring up, and that could be any fighter in the UFC. But when you look at Turcios, he is good in a lot of individual areas of MMA, and even in some of those kind of niche areas that you only expected of guys once they do reach the rankings. That's really nice to see out of a guy who's only had one fight in the UFC. The problem is, there's so many areas that he has to make up for defensively that I do worry about him when he does fight a pure pressure wrestler, because I don't know how much attack he's going to have off his back. I do worry about him when he fights that pure power puncher, just because I worry about if he's going to get countered, because his strikes are very long, and he doesn't necessarily pull back defensively all that well.
Kevin Natividad, pure power puncher. Kevin Natividad, pure wrestler. It's just when he brings them together in the cage, that's when he has success. You look at that fight against Estrada, it was that shovel hook that really did land, and that's where he was able to get the finish. But Natividad's a wrestler. He's not necessarily known as a striker. You look at it, he had a wild amateur career on the Hawaiian regional scene. He moved things over to Arizona to get good training, and the only loss that he has as an amateur was to Chaden Lealoa, who's really kind of gone on LFA, Bellator, so on and so forth. So for Natividad, a good opportunity to right the wrongs. He's been off for quite some time. That fight against Della was almost a year and a half ago, and for Ricky Turcios, had a long layoff after winning the Ultimate Fighter. One love, you know what I'm saying? But if you look at Ricky Turcios, takes all that time off, takes on Ayman Sahabi, he's a minus 220 favorite, and he went 27 of 235 on significant strikes, and it was weird because for Turcios, he can normally strike on the outside, land from those odd angles, he ducks, and then he throws like two right hands and comes back, and he yells all those traditional martial arts noises, and he tries to get guys into the fight. Like, I went back, and I'll talk a little bit more about the Ultimate Fighter fights, because I think that Turcios has fought two guys in the Ultimate Fighter that are a lot like Kevin Natividad. But for Turcios, in those fights, he wills himself into it, and he has a lot of success. In the fight against Aiemann Zahabi, as soon as Zahabi started to pressure him and started to land, you kind of see it in Turcios where he back off, create a little bit more separation, and then go back to trying to land some of that volume with not a lot of accuracy behind it or force.
And Aiemann Zahabi wasn't really thought of as a world beater at that time either. We do have to remember,
He had just beaten Draco Rodriguez about a year and a half before that. He had a long layoff.
But a lot of people felt like that was very much a setup fight for Ricky Turcios, so it was a little bit disappointing to see a guy who was so hyped up have a performance like that. But the other thing that has to be said is Turcios probably isn't as young as you probably think he is. He is almost 30 years old. Robert Whittaker won a UFC title and had won the Ultimate Fighter Smashes before he was 27.
Go back at Ricky Turcios, Season 1 Dana White's Contender Series against Boston Salmon. And if you look at it, Turcios' volume numbers are great. If you just look at numbers on a page, you might think, hey, Turcios won that fight. He got his chin checked by Salmon the entire fight, and Salmon ends up winning the decision.
I just think for Turcios, it's one of those cases of if you are going to put it all together and kind of become that top-tier version of that offensive dynamo that you potentially could become, we are going to have to see that sooner rather than later. Again, I brought this up 18,000 times against Raoni Barcelos. It was, hey, it's great that now you're starting to put it all together, but you're in your mid-30s. It would have been great if you started putting it all together when you were 27, 28, because then we would have seen you in your prime for a lot longer. For Turcios, you kind of forget. Again, he's almost 30, which again, at bantamweight, it's not like he's ancient by any means, but for a guy who is just getting started in the division, you would like for him to have a few more years at his disposal.
Well, for me, my point here with Ricky Turcios on The Ultimate Fighter, taking on Dan Argueta, who we've seen in the UFC, he's the translator or the speaker in general for Cub Swanson. And for Turcios, the second fight against Ludwig Schalignon, the first fight that he had against Argueta was one of those 2-rounders, and if it's tied, they have a sudden death fight. Well, Dan Argueta won the first round, utilizes wrestling. Ricky Turcios wins the second round, and in the third round, Turcios he was able to get the takedown early. He's able to get the back of Argueta. He looked really good in that part. But if you look at it in the second round for Turcios, he really did strike like a crash test dummy. He had a lot more pressure than he did in the first round, but he gets hit a lot by Argueta. Argueta's not really much of a striker. Argueta's a wrestler. He's very similar to a guy like Kevin Natividad. Then the fight against Ludwig Schalignon. First round, second round, it's a lot of Turcios on the outside. That was a 3-round fight, so I should say that. I had Turcios winning the first 2 rounds. A lot of movement, kicks, and then again, odd angle punches. Schalignon did get a couple of takedowns in the second round, but he didn't do much with them. Third round, last 20 seconds, go back and watch that. It's absolutely bonkers. It's a brawl. And they both have success there, but it was Turcios winning out. Then the fight against Brady Hiestand where, again, split decision win. You think that Turcios won a couple of the rounds, and he did utilize...
Look better on the feet.
Yeah, he did look a lot better on the feet. He rocked Hiestand. He dropped him at one point in that fight as well. So for Turcios coming into this one, it is tricky. Last time out, Luz is a minus 225 favorite. In this fight, he opened minus 185. He's at minus 153. For Natividad, open plus 160, plus 125. Trying to have a y'all must have forgot type of fight for Natividad. Looking for his first win in over 2 years. We have a look at the Tapology vote. Surprised us there to you. I'm going to say the fans are probably going to go with the Ultimate Fighter winner. I'm going to say over under 70% Turcios.
I think they'll be over.
And they are over by quite a bit. 561 total votes, 83% Turcios, 84% by decision. For the 17% that have Natividad, 71% by decision. Turcios doesn't have good takedown defense, and if Kevin Natividad puts the wrestling shoes on, he could really win this fight. Really win this fight.
Remember when our boy, and I'm just going to call him Nikolai, fought Carlos Alberg, and we said the exact same thing? The way I look at this fight is...
You don't have to shout.
If Ricky Turcios puts it all together, he's going to look phenomenal in this fight, win like a 30-27, look really good with his volume, defend a lot of takedowns, and really at least regain people's confidence that they once had with him winning the Ultimate Fighter and where he could become as a fighter. If Kevin Natividad puts it all together, I'm still going to be worried about him eating a big shot at most points throughout this fight. I guess I'm picking Ricky Turcios, but I'm trying to throw up a couple red flags. I didn't love the performance he had coming off the Ultimate Fighter win. I love the gritty performance he was able to have against Brady Hiestand, because that was a fight where he faced adversity, got taken down, had to dig really deep and look good in that last round to really be able to pull it out. So I'm going to pick Ricky Turcios, but I do think we are going to need to see more out of him in this fight for me to really think, okay, this guy can go on to become a ranked fighter in the future. history.
It really is a pop and popcorn type of fight that's out there for you. So, I mean, it really is a tough one. Like, for Turcios to be warranted as a favorite like this, it's due to the fact that Natividad hasn't won in quite some time. And for Natividad, some of the recent wins have been due to his hands. But really, when it comes down to it, you need to see the wrestling. I haven't seen the wrestling in some time. For that reason, I like Turcios. And Turcios, even when he gets taken down, threatens with submissions. He's very active with his guard in terms of strikes. Now, how much does that really play with the judges? That always remains to be seen. But for both of us, we're going to go with Ricky Turcios, Hadouken to get the win. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. Some big fights on this card, including Iwan Cutelaba and Kennedy Nzechukwu, and Derrick Lewis taking on Sergey Spivak in the main event. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.